The sound of tires scraping against the hot asphalt on a Saturday afternoon in Pine Brook was deafening and dry. Immediately after a police siren blared in urgent, menacing tones, a blue Honda Civic sedan, traveling at a perfectly normal speed, was abruptly pulled to the side of the road. The patrol car door opened, and two officers stepped out. One, Stephen Carr, in his 40s white, with a flushed face and murderous eyes, already had his hand on the holstered pistol at his hip. The other, Daniel Park, in his 20s and Asian American, looked tense and confused, trailing passively behind his partner. Sorry to interrupt the story. Before we continue, we'd really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us get closer to 1,000 subscribers. It means the world to us. Thank you so much. Get out of the car now. Put your hands above your head so we can see. Officer Carr shouted, his voice dripping with malice, as if the driver were a dangerous criminal. The Honda's door opened slowly, and a young black woman in her early 30s wearing simple blue jeans and a white t-shirt climbed out. She raised her hands as instructed. Is something wrong, officers? Did I do something wrong? She asked calmly and puzzled, without a trace of fear. Shut up! Don't talk to me! Carr snarled, striding toward her with contempt. He scanned her from head to toe, then without warning or any sign of threat, abruptly drew his Glock 19. A sharp, dry crack shattered the neighborhood's quiet. The woman crumpled to her knees with a painful cry, blood spreading rapidly across her white t-shirt in a horrifying crimson stain. Officer Park stood frozen pale and speechless. Carr stared at the smoking gun in his hand, then at the woman lying in a growing pool of blood on the pavement. What had just happened? A split-second decision, a brutal act. Did he even know whose body his bullet had entered? And would justice turn a blind eye to such inhumanity? The woman was Captain Tasha Davis. At 32, she was a rising star and a point of pride for the United States Army, leading an elite mechanized infantry unit. She had just returned from a 9-month deployment in a dangerous war zone where she and her team faced death daily. Renowned for her courage, leadership, and quick, accurate decision-making. Under pressure, Tasha was loved and respected by her comrades and superiors alike. She had earned numerous medals for her combat achievements and tireless dedication. Born into a family with a long military tradition, her father, a retired colonel, and her brother serving in the Navy, patriotism and iron discipline ran in her blood. Captain Davis was home on a brief leave in Pine Brook before reporting to a major military base for her next assignment. She planned only to pick up groceries for her family and visit a high school friend she hadn't seen in years when her life was shattered by a single senseless shot. She was dressed in plain civilian clothes with no indication of active military service. She simply wanted a relaxing afternoon like any other ordinary citizen. Meanwhile, elsewhere in Pine Brook, Officer Rob Carr was a notorious problem, an incurable ulcer within the local police department. He had served more than 15 years, but his personnel file was packed with complaints about excessive force, arrogant and condescending attitudes, and openly racist behavior toward people of color and other minorities. Carr was a white supremacist and a psychopath. He was contemptuous, suspicious, and hostile toward people of color, convinced they were the root of all crime and social ills. He was easily provoked by any perceived challenge or disrespect, often reacting violently and exaggeratedly. Carr had been investigated internally multiple times, but for unknown reasons, perhaps due to cover-ups by colleagues and superiors, or lack of clear evidence, he either escaped punishment or received only perfunctory discipline. This only made him more reckless and contemptuous of the law. Officer Daniel Park had graduated from the police academy a year ago and been paired with Carr for about 3 months. A second-generation Asian American Park had come into the job full of enthusiasm and idealism, eager to serve the community. But after just a short time working with the Carr, he recognized his partner's extreme dangerous nature. Park often witnessed Carr's derogatory remarks and abusive actions toward the civilians, especially people of color. Too inexperienced and afraid of retaliation, he usually stayed silent or only protested weakly. He felt helpless, tormented, and sucked into Carr's toxic spiral. That fateful Saturday, Carr and Park were on routine patrol when Carr, already in an irritable mood from earlier family troubles, spotted the blue Honda Civic driven by the woman. Despite no traffic violation or suspicious sign, his deep-seated racial hate flared, and he decided to stop her. She doesn't look like someone from here, he justified. She must be up to something shady. When she cooperated and calmly asked why she'd been stopped, Carr felt his authority challenged. In a moment of blind racial prejudice, irrational anger, and perhaps due to his own psychological issues, he drew his Glock and shot her without warning. The 9mm bullet struck her left abdomen, and she collapsed in agony as fresh blood soaked her white t-shirt. Officer Park froze, horrified at Carr's unprovoked cruelty. The gunshot shattered the quiet neighborhood. Nearby residents peered from their windows and called 911 for help. Carr, stunned at what he'd done, felt vague fear over the consequences, but his instinct for self-preservation and habit of covering up crimes kicked in. He did not call for medical aid or render first aid. He began to stage the scene and coerce his partner into complicity. He yelled at the younger officer, ordering him to keep quiet, say nothing, and follow his instructions exactly. Carr may have tried to plant an object resembling a weapon by her body to claim self-defense, but rapid witnesses or Park's guilty conscience likely prevented full cover-up. When additional police cars and a Pine Brook ambulance arrived, Carr told his superiors that the woman had violently resisted, refused orders, and threatened his life, forcing him to shoot in self-defense. Terrified by Carr's aggression and veiled threats, the younger officer initially supported that false account despite torment and guilt. Paramedics rushed the wounded woman to Pine Brook Central Hospital in critical condition, her life hanging by a thread. In the operating room, doctors fought for hours to repair severe abdominal injuries and stop internal bleeding. The initial prognosis was grim. Her family, her parents, her brother serving at a remote naval base, and her college-age sister were devastated and furious to learn the police claimed she'd resisted. They knew her as a disciplined, law-abiding officer who would never act violently. News of the shooting spread quickly through her former unit in Army leadership. Shocked and angered, her comrades resolved she would not face this alone. Once she stabilized in the ICU, her relatives informed investigators of her true identity: a United States Army captain, a decorated officer and symbol of courage and service. This revelation struck the Pine Brook Police Department and local government like an earthquake. The victim was not a random suspect, but an honored active duty officer. Army headquarters and the Criminal Investigation Division immediately dispatched a special team leading investigators, crime scene analysts, forensic experts, and interrogators with combat experience to Pine Brook. They were tasked with a full impartial inquiry to protect the honor and safety of their service member, even on leave and out of uniform. Their mission was to work alongside and rigorously oversee the local police investigation, while also conducting an independent inquiry to uncover the full truth. The presence of military investigators immediately put unprecedented pressure on the Pine Brook Police Department. No longer could the incident be swept under the rug or handled perfunctorily in Carr's favor. Every detail and piece of evidence had to be examined thoroughly, objectively, and transparently. Investigators collected and analyzed crucial evidence: security camera footage from nearby homes, eyewitness accounts from those too frightened to speak at first, ballistic trajectory reconstructions, forensic examination of Carr's weapon, and a detailed crime scene analysis. Under mounting pressure, guilt and advice from his family and counsel, Officer Park began to crack. He could no longer cover up Carr's brutal actions, especially once the victim's military status became clear. Seasoned CID agents quickly spotted contradictions in Park's initial statements and focused on Park, the weaker link in the cover-up. After days of intense questioning and confronted with irrefutable crime scene findings, no weapon on the victim or in her car, plus witness testimony that she posed no threat, Park broke. He gave a full hour-long confession. Carr had stopped the soldier without cause, hurled racist insults, and shot her while she stood with hands raised. He also admitted Carr had threatened him into lying. Park's testimony, alongside physical evidence and other witness statements, provided grounds to charge Officer Carr with multiple serious offenses intentionally causing grievous bodily harm with a deadly weapon, abuse of authority, making false statements to investigators, and hate crimes driven by racial bias. A warrant was issued and Carr was arrested at the station. News of the charges sparked nationwide outrage. A black female soldier once celebrated as a hero had been shot by her own country's police out of prejudice and power abuse. Peaceful protests erupted in major cities demanding justice for the soldier and deep reforms to curb police brutality and racism. As her condition improved and she remained confined to a wheelchair, the captain issued a powerful statement from her hospital bed calling for the strictest possible accountability, not just for herself, but for all innocent victims of police abuse. Her story, a soldier who once faced enemy fire on distant battlefields, became a new kind of war fighting to rebuild her life and demand justice at home. Her courage and unbreakable spirit moved millions nationwide, amplifying pressure on the courts to punish her attacker appropriately. The trial of the officer ran for several tense weeks under intense public and media scrutiny. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, security footage, forensic reports, and the honest testimony of witnesses, including the officer who had once stood by his partner. The defense was unable to counter the weight of irrefutable facts. Though still recovering, the soldier insisted on attending key hearings. The image of her seated in a wheelchair, scars visible, yet eyes shining with resolve, was deeply emotional and left a lasting impression on all in the courtroom. After deliberation, the jury found the officer guilty on every charge. The presiding judge, known for strict fairness, condemned the officer's brutal racist actions. He stressed that those actions had inflicted lasting physical and psychological harm on the soldier and her family and had deeply eroded public trust in law enforcement. The officer received a 35-year federal sentence, widely seen as severe, but reflecting society's outrage. He was also ordered to pay $55,000 in restitution to cover her medical bills, emotional trauma, and the long-term impact on her life and military career. This case marked a turning point in the battle against police brutality and racism in Pine Brook and beyond. Under Justice Department oversight, the local department underwent a sweeping overhaul, stricter use of force rules, mandatory bias training, and new accountability measures. The junior officer who testified truthfully faced no criminal charges, but was dismissed from the force. The soldier's long recovery continues. Physical scars and psychological wounds may never fully heal. Yet she remains a powerful symbol of resilience and an influential voice for justice and equality. Looking ahead, she may resume military service in a new capacity or retire to advocate for civil rights and criminal justice reform. 3 months later, the wounds, both physical and emotional, have begun to heal, but the fight for lasting change continues. The soldier, now walking with only a slight limp, has returned to advocacy work, meeting with lawmakers in Washington to push for nationwide bias training standards and stronger civilian oversight of police. Her resilience inspired a grassroots coalition of veterans, faith leaders, and civil rights organizations to launch Stand for Dignity, a community-led campaign that hosts monthly forums in Pine Brook, giving residents a safe space to share experiences and hold officers accountable. Inside the police department, every new recruit sits through an expanded mirror protocol training module, and quarterly audits of use of force reports are open to public review. The former junior officer, cleared of criminal charges but dismissed, has spoken at several law enforcement conferences about the perils of silent complicity, earning praise for turning remorse into reform. Even the chief, under renewed public trust, has piloted a community ride-along program so citizens can see the challenges of patrol work firsthand and offer real-time feedback. Local schools have adopted a curriculum unit on civic ethics, where students write essays about when they've seen injustice and brainstorm solutions. At the supermarket where it all began, a small plaque now hangs by aisle 7 in honor of courage and accountability. Passers-by pause to read it, a quiet reminder that one person's steadfast commitment to dignity can spark a movement, and that true justice demands more than a verdict. It requires ongoing vigilance, conversation, and the conviction to keep standing up 3 months, 3 years, or 3 decades from now. 6 months on, the ripple effects have become waves. The Stand for Dignity Coalition has grown into a statewide network with chapters in 3 neighboring cities organizing joint training events and sharing best practices. Our former captain, now an honorary advisor to the state legislature, helped shepherd a bill mandating implicit bias refresher courses for every sworn officer funded by a small surcharge on traffic fines. It passed with bipartisan support and goes into effect next quarter. At Pinebrook Police Department, citizen review panels have the authority to recommend disciplinary action, and body camera footage is published quarterly in anonymized form. Use of force complaints have dropped by 40%, and resident surveys show a 60% increase in perceived fairness. Even morning coffees at the corner diner strike a different tone. Regulars chat openly about what accountability looks like, not in theory, but in the everyday interactions they now demand. The ex-officer who once stood silent now travels the state, no longer a pariah, but a cautionary story soaring past his old colleagues with a message: complicity is a choice, and it's never too late to choose better. He's testified at academies, testified before panels, and quietly mentors new recruits on integrity under fire. Schools across the county incorporate civic ethics in action projects. Students shadow first responders, then present proposals for community-led audits and empathy workshops. One group just published a podcast interviewing veterans, police, and faith leaders, all living proof that dialogue can reshape institutions. And back at that same supermarket aisle, 7 still bears its small plaque. But now beneath it, there's a fresh layer of footprints where people pause to reflect and sometimes leave a note. Thank you for not looking away. 6 months later, justice isn't a moment that passed. It's a promise kept through sustained vigilance, evolving policies, and a community that refuses to let dignity fade from view. 1 year later, Pinebrook's transformation has become a blueprint for other cities. The state's mirror protocol training now appears in police academies nationwide, and dozens of departments have formed joint oversight councils modeled on Pinebrook. The Grassroots Stand for Dignity Coalition celebrated its 12th monthly forum by hosting a virtual summit with advocates from 5 states sharing data strategies and heartfelt testimonials. Every recruit at the local academy begins with a Dignity First pledge, and quarterly public reviews of body camera footage are live streamed for transparency. Use of force incidents have plunged by more than half, while community trust metrics have nearly doubled, according to an independent survey. The small plaque in aisle 7 remains a pilgrimage site. Visitors add handwritten notes of solidarity, turning it into a living archive of accountability. Even the farmers market buzzes differently. Uniformed officers chat freely with vendors, answering questions about their work and listening to neighbors' concerns before shifts. The former junior officer, once paralyzed by fear, now leads integrity workshops, crediting that pivotal day for his personal redemption. 1 year on justice in Pinebrook is no longer a single verdict, but a sustained promise to keep looking, keep listening, and keep standing for dignity long after the headlines have moved on. This story teaches us a profound lesson about the power of one individual speaking up against injustice and the crucial role communities play in holding authority accountable. The message is that no one should look away when witnessing wrongdoing, whether it is by the police, the military, or anyone in uniform. Ask yourself, what would you do in that situation? Would you dare to speak out or choose silence out of fear? Now I want to hear your personal viewpoint. How far do you think the protagonist's actions can shift law enforcement culture? Has this story stirred confidence or disappointment in our justice system? And finally, when do you predict racial profiling and police bias will truly end? 2030, 2050, or even sooner? Share your thoughts below. Which legal reforms do you believe are most urgent? And what are you ready to do today to help drive that change? Don't forget to, if you find this message meaningful, share to spread awareness, and subscribe to join us in following more stories of justice, courage, and civic responsibility. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional. All characters and events are creations of the author and are not intended to reference or criticize any real person. It is designed to raise awareness of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating one another with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose all forms of violence, prejudice, and injustice. Please consider this before viewing.